Alright, so we're going to look at how to build a square using a compass. Now this particular compass, it's kind of like a safety compass, if you will. It's a particular brand, but the idea is that you have a piece that moves back and forth, and you hold this and it spins back and forth that way, and that's how you work this particular piece of technology, if you want to call it that. I guess it's old school technology. Now, how do we build a square? We're going to start simple. We're just going to simply start by building a length. I'm not going to necessarily measure this out any particular length. I'm then going to label that line segment just A and B, any two variables that we want to use there for this piece. And then we're going to look at wanting to create the first part of what makes something a square. Primarily here, we're going to identify or try to build 4 congruent sides and 4 congruent angles. And the idea about 4 congruent angles of a quadrilateral would mean that each angle would have to be 90 degrees, since all 4 of them have to add to 360. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to draw something above A, something above B, that is perpendicular to AB, line segment AB. So I'm going to start that by simply extending line segment AB. And if you want to do a dotted line, because that makes it a little bit easier to distinguish the line segment we're concerned about from the rest of the line, that's fine. I am simply doing this so that I have enough space to do all the other movements I need to do. Primarily what I mean is I'm going to pick some spot A. I'm going to pick a here. I'm going to pick some spot that's away from A. Doesn't really matter where. And I'm going to hold it in place right over the top. You can see that I have the crosshairs right on A. And I'm just simply going to make a mark on that line there. I'm going to do the same thing from the other side, where I'm going to put the crosshairs on A, and then I'm going to make a mark. Alright, and then I can label these two things maybe as anything we want. Let's call them D, call this one F. Alright, and from there we want to build a perpendicular from A. We'll worry about the exact length later. Well, right now we just need to get the perpendicular line. So I have this crosshairs over D, and if you look through, you can look closely. You can see that the line, or the dot for A, is directly in that hole. So I'm just going to move that further down. Not much. I can move it way down there if I wanted to, but I may run out of paper space that way. So just moving it down just a little bit, just so it's a little bit past A, is all I really need to do. And I'm going to go above A. I'm going to mark. I'm going to go below B. I'm going to mark. You can get away with not doing below, but it does make it a little bit easier if you do both, is my experience. I'm then going to put the crosshairs over F, okay? And I'm going to do the same thing. Now keep in mind, I've been using that front hole, so that's one I'm going to continue to use. All right, so right there, and right there. Now when I do that, I should have created a line segment that can go through both those intersection points I just created and A. Now, that of course is much longer than line segment AB, so I need to figure out where am I going to place C on this line segment. And I can measure that out, but one of the things I've discovered about measuring things is if you can avoid measuring stuff, do avoid it. So I'm actually going to place, see there's B, that's the length I'm concerned about. I can move this back so that it's directly over the top of it, and then I can go up here and I can mark it. Now I didn't have to worry about if it's 7.2 centimeters long or whatever the measurement is. I now know that this length here, which I'm going to label as C, AC is now congruent to AB because I used the idea behind circles to measure these out so that they are the same length. So one of the things I now know is that angle A, actually, let's be a little bit more precise, right? Angle CAB is 90 degrees. And since I'm setting it equal to an angle, I need to put the M in front of it to denote it as being measurement of. Now, the reason why I switched from just saying angle A to CAB as the angle is because angle A could refer to, the way I have this drawn, it could be 3 different things. It could be this section over here in between on the right hand side. It could be this section right here on the left hand side, or it could be this section underneath. So to specify which one I'm talking about, I'm going to use the 3 letters to denote where the turning is occurring at. Okay. Now the other thing I've also done here is I've created this in such a way that line segment AB is congruent to line segment BA. But here the order doesn't really matter. I'm writing this in, but I do need the correct parts and pieces. So now I have this as a right angle, and this piece is congruent to that one, which is great. Now the next thing I need to do is to get a perpendicular line right here. We're going to go through the same process now. As a pausing point here, if I wanted to create a rectangle instead of a square, I would just make sure that this length here, this CA, is a different length. And that's really all the difference would be, is just instead of matching B and putting it up here to create C, I would just create some other length there, whatever I wanted it to be. So once again, I'm going to go through that exact same process. Maybe I need to extend C out a little bit in either direction, maybe I don't. I'm going to place my crosshairs over the top of C, and then in this case I'm actually going to go beyond A, because that way I can stay away from the rest of my figure here. And when I do that, I see that it's off my line, so I'm just going to continue my line like that. So now I have this spot here, that spot there, which I can call anything I want. And since I'm using these values to create other values, I'm just going to reuse D and F again. I'm going to call this one F prime, and I'm going to call this one up here D prime. I could also call them Z and X and A and B, or whatever I haven't used yet, so I couldn't use B, I guess. But I could call them anything I want. Now I'm going to set my crosshairs over D, and remember, I just have to go more than the distance to C. So if you look through right now, you can see that that is directly on C. So I'm just going to move it over a little bit, and then make a mark, make a mark. I'm going to move over to F prime, make a mark, make a mark, and there it is. So now I just draw a line, and hopefully all 3 of these match up, which they mostly do. Right there. Now I have this line segment, and now this is a right angle. So now I have that angle AC, and then something over here, let's call it E. Well, we're going to figure out where E is in a second. It's also 90 degrees, and since I said it equal, I need to make sure I put the M in front of there for measurement of. So now I need to figure out, where does this piece right here go? How far over do I make it? I have 2 options. I can then draw a perpendicular from B upward, right? And that will intersect somewhere right there, and that will end up being perpendicular. Or I can make this measurement from here to here, and that will make it perpendicular, because the idea behind the square is 4 right angles, 4 congruent sides gives us a square. Really all I need to do is create 3 of those, and I'm pretty much set. So here I have 2 congruent sides. I just need a 3rd congruent side, or I need a 3rd congruent angle. I do one of those 2 things, and I will create the figure I need. So I'm going to do this way, where I'm just going to put my crosshairs over A. I'm going to move my cursor, my hole here, until it's on top of B there. Okay, just to show you again. All right, there's B. I'm going to move this down so it's on top of B. I'm going to go up to here, and there is, we call this E, right? There's E right there. Same distance away, so now we know that CA is congruent to BA, which is congruent to CE, because we drew it in such a way to make it congruent. And now we draw this, and we have a square. Now on my paper it absolutely looks square. On the screen it doesn't quite look square, so I don't know what's going on with that. But anyway, and you can check this, and you can see that if I use the protractor feature of this thing, I can see that it is actually meeting right there at a right angle. I don't know if you can see that well on the screen, but it's happening. And over here, hopefully the same thing is occurring. sure enough, yep, 90 degrees. So just to prove that that is actually 90 degrees, I can do the same thing here. 90 degrees again. Okay, so those are actually 90 degrees. So this is 90 degrees, that one's 90 degrees, and as a result of this, this length right here is also going to be congruent, and we can check that by putting the crosshairs on top of that. There it is right there in the hole again. Put the crosshairs over E, and then it should be right there on top of B, if I can get it lined up correct. There it is. Okay, so there's how we create a square using just a compass. Okay, now I encourage you to practice this a few times until you get it worked out and it makes sense. Enjoy.